Hello and thank you for tuning in. I am the Rogue Savage. Steve Shives is an outspoken YouTuber and male feminist who has a tendency of dismissing people who hold different opinions than his own. Recently he put out a video that kind of explains his take on what you should do to people who harbor different ideas from yours. I hope you know a good doctor because this shit's about to get cancerous.
Do all ideas deserve a fair hearing?
Yes.
Sure. But what about ideas who have had their fair hearing and have been widely discredited and rejected?
If they've already been vetted, discredited, and rejected, then it would stand to reason that they've already had their fair hearing. But even so, you should still acknowledge that those ideas exist, or at least have existed. And if evidence comes to light, which could prove these ideas' validity, then it might be worth reviewing. That's kind of how science works, actually.
With the recent punching of white supremacist Richard Spencer and protesters shutting down scheduled appearances by racist, misogynist, professional internet troll Milo Yiannopoulos.
Protesters? I'm pretty sure when you physically assault people, destroy property, shoot fireworks, and throw rocks at cops, I'm pretty sure that's rioting, not protesting. And as far as Richard Spencer and Milo Yiannopoulos goes, well, I'm not about to stand up for Richard Spencer because, as far as I can tell, he hasn't exactly denied being a white nationalist. But Milo Yiannopoulos definitely has.
And the left isn't going to like it very much. But there's a better way, you know? Don't fight identity politics with identity politics. White pride, white nationalism, white supremacy isn't the way to go. The way to go is reminding them and yourselves that you should be aspiring to values and to ideas. You should be focusing on what unites people, not what drives them apart. And you shouldn't give a shit about skin color. You shouldn't give a shit about sexuality. You shouldn't give a shit about gender. And you should be deeply suspicious of the people who do. Thank you very much.
Not only that, but he's also a homosexual Jew who has an affinity for black genitalia. That kind of debunks your statement as far as the racism goes. Misogyny, though, do you have any proof of that? Because I haven't really seen it, and I follow Milo Yiannopoulos pretty closely.
I've heard many people arguing that the likes of Spencer and Yiannopoulos should be allowed to have their say, that their voices ought to be heard, so that if their claims are false or their rhetoric is harmful, we can respond in kind, with the truth, or with better ideas.
That's true. That's how organizations like the KKK fell. At the height of their numbers, they topped out somewhere around 4 million members. Now it's estimated that they range somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000. When you compare that to the overall population of the United States, they're barely even a blip on the radar anymore. The problem is, people like you have a tendency of blocking people you disagree with before the conversation even starts. Therefore, these differing viewpoints, are never truly challenged. This trend tends to foster a sort of groupthink that permeates whenever you refuse to step outside of your ideological bubble, and can cause the growth of harmful ideas to flourish, such as advocating beating the crap out of people you disagree with.
The people making these arguments are, for the most part, good, well-intentioned people. Many of them are just as disgusted by Yiannopoulos and Spencer as I am. They're motivated by their dedication to free and open discourse, to the principle that no idea should be suppressed.
And you know, for the most part, I feel like you're pretty well-intentioned too. Hey, common ground, right? But it seems like, for the most part, the people on the right, these people that you disagree with, are constantly trying to reach out, to build that bridge, to cross that gap. But unfortunately, when you keep blocking people, these discussions, these issues, are never going to get resolved.
And in principle, that's a fine notion, particularly when we're talking about the role the government plays in regulating speech. Do we want the state stepping in and saying that there are certain things we just can't say, no matter how vile those things might be?
No.
No, I don't think most of us would want that.
Hey, common ground. There you go. Making progress. I like it.
But does that mean that every propagator of every theory and ideology is entitled to a platform and an audience? No.
Yes. Are you saying that we should deny an audience the right to seek out differing viewpoints and then decide for themselves the validity of those viewpoints? Should an audience then not have the right to provide a speaker with a platform, whether or not they agree with that speaker's point of views? After all, how many people do you agree with 100%? I would wager probably no one. After this audience provides this platform, should that speaker not have the right to speak? How is preventing a speaker from speaking and an audience from listening not in of itself an affront to free speech?
Of course not. And since when has that ever been the case?
Since the ratification of the First Amendment.
We ignore people promoting what we have come to regard as bad ideas all the time. It happens in science, it happens in politics, it happens in our everyday lives. There comes a point where the argument is over, where continued discourse on the matter would be of no use to anyone other than the most stubborn, die-hard supporters of a roundly rejected position.
I suppose there's some validity to that at least. Hey, more common ground. As it turns out, I tend to treat people like flat earthers in a similar fashion. After I debunked their claims, I pretty much started ignoring them until they came up with other claims, which they claimed credible, in which case I just debunked those too. And I did so with facts, reason, and logic. Enough people have followed that example over time to the point where now flat earthers are pretty much a small minority. Nobody really takes these people serious anymore because people over time have been able to see how bad these ideas were. The same thing happened to the KKK, in fact. They weren't beaten with bullets, Steve. They were beaten with ideas.
The thing is, it's not just better ideas that defeat bad ideas. My friend Eli Bosnick made this point on Twitter a few days ago. I'm saying he's my friend, but we don't really know each other that well. I like him, I think he likes me, so I'm saying he's my friend. And if Eli has a problem with that, he can come find me and I'll take care of his problem for him. How about that? Actually, no, forget that last bit. Eli and I have only met in person once and we're about the same size, and I can't fight, like, at all. So if he can handle himself even a little bit, that might go really badly for me.
Cool story, bro.
My casual acquaintance Eli Bosnick made this point on Twitter a few days ago. Refuting bad ideas with good ideas is important, but so is removing bad ideas from the discourse. And when we refuse to do that, when we continue to engage with people pushing arguments that have already been refuted, we treat their bad ideas as though they were legitimate.
And so how would you suggest we remove those bad ideas? Would we then be required to remove those ideas by force? Because, Steve, that is a literal tenet of fascism. There's a little bit of irony there, considering how you're so keen on accusing people of being Nazis. All that does is show how oppressive you are. And all you're going to do is draw more people to your opposition. Such as the case of Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm sure since those riots at UC Berkeley, a lot more people have heard about Milo Yiannopoulos than before, and are now busy Googling away trying to figure out what this guy is about. And in doing so, he's probably swaying a lot more people to his ideas as a result. Wouldn't it be better to persuade them to your side using facts, logic, and reason, and possibly steal others away from that ideology in the same fashion? I mean, it worked pretty well for defeating the KKK. If your ideas are so legitimate, Steve, why won't it work for you?
There's a name for this, the balance fallacy. It's what happens when people see their ideas treated as though they have merit or might have merit when we already know that they don't have merit.
The problem, Steve, is that in order for that to hold true, you actually have to prove your position. Simply calling somebody out as a racist misogynist without any proof does not support your claim. So really, what you're saying is, instead of providing the proof for your claim, as a reasonable person would, you're using the balance fallacy as an excuse to run away from the opposition of your bad ideas, instead of trying to bridge that gap and convince people to your side. The problem is, you tend to make unsupported assertions about people, and in doing so, attacking these people's character. You see, there's actually a logical fallacy for that, too. It's called an ad hominem. Meanwhile, whenever your ideas are challenged, you tend to block people who are opposing your bad ideas, or you just flat out ignore them. There's a logical fallacy for that, too, as it turns out. It's called invincible ignorance.
The balance fallacy is the only hope the likes of Spencer and Yiannopoulos have for continuing to earn a living disseminating their long ago discredited ideas. That's why they lean so hard on their warped, self-serving caricature of free speech, which in their interpretation includes not only the right to speak, but also the right to a microphone and an audience.
I would disagree. I would say that the main hope of these individuals carrying on would be the continued fascist-like tactics of groups like Antifa, and people like you who constantly call people out as racists or misogynists or any other form of bigot for that matter, all the while these claims being unsubstantiated. You see, Steve, these fascist tactics that you're proposing are fueling his fire. Again, it is the audience that is providing him with the platform and the microphone, in addition to his right to exercise his freedom of speech.
But that's not how it works. Refuting bad ideas with good ideas is necessary, but that's just step one. Step two is leaving behind the bad ideas and the people who continue to cling to them and demand our attention.
Again, I feel like I should point out that invincible ignorance fallacy. Yes.
Stop it. Get some help.
Do they have the right to continue to speak in support of their bad ideas? Sure they do. Do they have the right to a platform to better enable them to disseminate those ideas? Absolutely not.
Actually, yes. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution affords them that right.
Let them speak, but let it be from atop an apple crate on a street corner, not on a stage at a university or in front of a radio microphone or a television camera.
And how far does that slippery slope go before we finally reach North Korea exactly?
We've heard what they have to say. Now it's time to stop indulging them so the rest of us can move forward.
Enjoy your echo chamber then, Steve. Meanwhile, I'm going to continue to talk to the people you alienate with your bad ideas, in the hopes of making progress. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. If you like what I do, please like, comment, share, subscribe, check out my Patreon, and I will see you next time. Savage out.
I love me some chicks with dick.